Crow's Test Master. Welcome back to another episode of Crow's Newsletter. This week we're taking on the Legend of Zelda series. But first, let's describe what's happening this week on my channel. This week, there's only going to be 2 episodes of Super Mario 64, so look forward to that. Obviously on the usual days, Wednesdays and Fridays. Let's get started about the Legend of series. The Legend of Zelda is pretty much an open world RPG, somewhat combated series, which the first one came on in 1986 on the NES, which was a very basic little, your little guy runs around with a sword and a good range of weapons to take down enemies, and you're forced to, I want to say forced, but you have this option to save the princess, that or just free roam and explore the beautiful world that they provided you and amazing music. Now there are 3, I would like to say 3 major points. I could put a 4th one in, but I'm gonna say 3 major points is enemies. Do they provide the proper enemies to actually make you use every single enemy? And open world, and I mean by open world, like that open world also allows you to use your weapons that you are provided to actually achieve other locations. And last one, gameplay value. After me beating the game, does it really have that same feeling if I wanted to beat it again? Now, let's start with the enemies, so that's slightly easier to take down. The enemies on the first NES really, I want to say, didn't really provide you that, all the enemies can be defeated differently. Some enemies had to be defeated differently, but most, like 85% to 90%, of the enemies could have been taken about just whacking them with a sword, which was okay, I guess, but it didn't really have that feeling that you actually look for all that and just show you that, hey, look, I got these items, I can, do this and that, which was okay, and then that's when more games came out, it didn't really change, didn't really provide that different, you can destroy enemies differently. When a real game came in that required it, it's pretty much Ocarina of Time. And I wouldn't say that 100% because you still could have just timed it perfectly and kill the keys, aka the bats. Which wasn't really the purpose of the keys. You're supposed to take them out with the bow and arrow or the slingshot usually. And on top of that, you still had still could use the sword better than that, due to the fact that it was really hard to use, even though you had the Z targeting. Now when you enter the water, pretty much in the Ocarina of Time, which I think was the first time they did that kind of mechanic, you had enemies in the water, which while you're in the water you couldn't use the sword, you had to use your hook shot, and the only thing, you had your hook shot and shield only, which was really challenging because you couldn't just press crazily because there was somewhat delayed to get to that enemy. So that was really interesting. But the best, I would like to say the best mechanic used for enemies will have to be for Skyward Sword. Though you couldn't take down every enemy by a simple swinging around, hope that you kill something, and get lucky with the hit. You really have to time it and actually take your time analyzing each enemy, which was an amazing feature, even though they lacked the gameplay for it and level mechanics. You couldn't really destroy the moblins and just by whacking a sword. They too had a sword, which was kind of weird, which I don't know why would they do that, but you had to go with them. If they were blocking vertically, you attack them vertically. If they were blocking horizontally, you attack them horizontally. So it's okay. Now, when it comes to an enemy, I like that, but I want to get to, it gets to the point that most enemies get defeated by the same pattern. So even that game has its limitations. So, though that was amazing though, it really did lack some options of, you couldn't defeat this enemy unless you had this item, which I really wanted, which probably provided the worst, way of providing it, because all enemies on Skyward Sword could be defeated by a sword. If you could reach them, that's a different story, but all enemies could have been destroyed, which was kind of sad for me. Now, speaking about Skyward Swords, that's also the game that provided the worst open world. Why I'm saying the worst is because you had to pick your place of location and you started at certain points. I didn't want to fly up to be transported to a different, even though I'm right next door to it. I wanted to walk there if it's possible. I wanted to enjoy that adventure, the transition. That's where Skyward Sword lacked personally. It was beautiful when you got in, but come on, I didn't want. Not everybody wanted to walk that way. Not everybody wanted to do that. Even though probably the biggest, I wanted some open world, and probably the biggest recorded open world other than Skyward Sword would probably be Twilight and Wind Waker. Wind Waker are pretty much ocean, so I don't really consider it, because most 60% of the game is pretty much you traveling on water. But though once you got an island, it really made you astounded. Well, Twilight, when you traveled, everything had a reason. And once you reach the border, time to go back and do something. Wish there wasn't really a border, but I guess you can't really do that. The world has to end somewhere. But that's where Twilight really shined its best, was the open world. I think if I'm right, it would take over 20 days to actually walk to every single place. And just go through it. Ignore the enemy, just go through it. I want to say 20 days. I can't remember the exact time, but it was a really long time. And I really thought it was another good part. Now, here's the tricky part. So did the NES, provided that gameplay value. Now, where did it stop? That real open world, which I would like to say, hate to say, is Ocarina of Time. That's where it dropped. And I'm sorry to say, even though I love that game, second best game for me, and then Twilight first, it wasn't really open. As you can see, everything was kind of predetermined, because you couldn't enter the place unless you had this or this. Well, the same thing applied to Twilight, but it makes sense at least. And Ocarina didn't make too much sense. And the NES was amazing. Only a few things, but it was not too bad. It was probably the best open world we got. Graphic wise, probably the worst one we got, but it had provided an open world. Now, with the open world, you gotta have proper game mechanics and nice, just nice. But yeah, that's it. I can't rephrase it the other way, like I do, which personally not every game had. Ocarina provided it had a good backstory, nice enemies. The mechanics were okay. Majora's Mask was probably one of the best mechanics ever. Why? Because it allowed you to somewhat exploit what has been used at the point when you find out that, hey, I can't use it because I have a disadvantage with it. It's like, well, time to find a new game mechanic. So they really allowed you to use different mechanics, and once you got it, it was okay. They didn't really use the mechanics later on. They just used it once and got rid of it, but it still provided more mechanics than I ever saw in the game. Why did I pick Skyward Sword? Because, like I said previously, the enemy could defeat it 100% with a sword, and there was no new technique you discover other than bomb bowling and beetle bomb dropping. That's pretty much it. There's not much else there is to it. Dousing doesn't even count because it's showing you where you gotta play next. So I guess Skyward Sword is really out, and I'm probably like a little biased on it because I haven't played 100%, but it's true. I've seen it. It's really linear, which destroys the replay value of a game. And that's where the biggest question comes in: replay value. Does the game provide a high replay value? And the NES, for me, I haven't played through it 100% because I get frustrated where to go next. So that always gives me that very courage or the strength to go back and say, I want to finish this. 10 minutes later, I'll see you next week or in a couple of hours. But Ocarina of Time was still good, even though I memorized it. It was okay. It didn't really provide that high. It had that nostalgia feeling to the fact that we actually getting 2D to 3D. Probably for me, the best game that actually provided the best high replay value, probably because I'm biased towards it, is Twilight Princess. Why? Because it had a great backstory, and the enemies were unique. It was amazing, and on top of that, it had this feel that you have some sort of reason. Even though most people say Twilight is the worst game ever invented, I think Skyward Sword is probably the worst. Even though it was the most beautifully designed, it was probably the worst. Because even though it had backstory is very linear, I knew what to do next. And it was not like Majora's Mask or like the NES, which you had very few clues or no clues to direct you where your next, destination was. So after all the time, I love the Legend of Zelda series, even though there are some major flaws in some games, like the bootleg version of the Legend of Zelda, which I will not go into for certain reasons why. But I give it a nice 8 out of 10. Though it does have a lot of flaws. There are some games that have a lot of flaws. There are other games that don't have too many flaws. Next week I will be taking out the Kirby series, which is a beautiful game and I love it. And that's all the time I got. This crow's gotta fly. Bye bye.